Okay, hello. I will be talking about for my visual audio information for feminism and art for about Judy Chicago and some of the readings we did in class. I wanted to focus a bit on specifically like one of Judy's works because I had learned about it like a lot in post-war art and had some interesting comparisons about like the whole idea of like retroactive perspective on feminism and also like how some of her work has influenced my own because I had already been interested in her as an artist and was in fact thinking of her when we were discussing the whole art family tree, as well as some other artists who I will probably be bringing up throughout the course, and then obviously in the final assignment, whether, anyways. So this is an image of the artist herself, and then this is one of the pieces that has the biggest influence on me. It is Dinner Party. It is this massive collaborative piece she made with a place setting for many iconic women in the history of, well, art and like art movements, like whether it's like visual art characters or like writers and authors. Though notably the only woman who was left out of this was the Virgin Mary, as she is frequently portrayed, and was meant like in the opinion of like Judy Chicago and the women who were involved in it, like makers and doers, and those who are like have their voice frequently taken away and deserve a place at the table, quite literally. You can see in the design that as you can see, the tiles have the individual names of like every woman who is given a seat at the table in this, and it's also listed here throughout, and each individual setting was made to be its own unique representation for every single woman who is involved. Like in this, I believe there are like several like Emily Dickinson and Mary Shelley and other famous writers, and here is an up-close shot of one of the place settings. All of them are very intentionally given like imagery to imply the vagina and the vaginal region, and as well as like matching cups and plateware, though obviously the plates are the main focus, and there are names embroidered throughout, like as well as the ones below. Like you can see Harriet Tubman up here, there, and Howard Shaw for like up here for one of the place settings. Something that was brought up in my post-war class when we were discussing the feminist art movement and Judy Chicago's involvement in it is the choice to use the vaginal genitals, because at the time this was considered a rather liberating choice to have it displayed, because it was very much, oh, we don't talk about those things sort of mindset. But to do something like this now might have greater controversy because it would imply that these genitals are inherently feminine, which is not a take modern feminism, or at least intersectional and accepting feminism takes, because there's an understanding that sex and gender are not intrinsically linked. And so, but at the time this was considered like very like bold. In fact, for a while, well, due to the sort of radical imagery of it in combination with the size, because this was quite a massive installation, it was not displayed for, I believe, 7 years afterwards, and it took a long time for any museum to be willing to, despite the fact that it is now a rather famous piece of work. Here is another plate up close, which I know the plates don't seem to be functional plates, but like I just am very like encaptured by like the movement of the actual like I'm using my finger to point, as if you can see the like folds in the clay work and then the glossing, and like this is one of the ones that is very much more clearly a vagina. Some of them were left a little bit more vague, but they always had this general shape of like central, the like central vulva, and then the surrounding like lips. So this is actually a work that I made that I wanted to use as an example of like an influence. It's very simplified. This was actually an early stage photo, and I'm planning to go in and do a lot of changes to it. But I was thinking a lot about Judy Chicago's work with the table and like the manifestation on it of like an issue. So this is basically sort of like a dinner party I made involving my own like medical issues, because as I have mentioned in class, I have health restrictions, like specifically it's called gastroparesis, and it does several things to my body, but the main one is it's incredibly hard for me to digest most foods, and it's painful, especially if it's something that has like sugar or oil or dairy in it. So I made a table display of many foods that I cannot eat, like, or at least it is incredibly painful to do so. So, sugary things like pies and ice creams and cakes, and like meat and like the breads and cheeses and like alcohols. These are all things I struggle with, and to represent the danger of that, I made them blue, because since blue foods don't truly exist in nature, including blueberries, and so blue frequently means poison, as well as like the poppies being a manifestation of death. Sorry, anyway, I'm getting a little off topic. I just wanted to use it to be an explanation on how, at least in one way, Judy Chicago had previously already influenced my work, and why I was so excited to read about her in class for this assignment. And I'll go on to the next thing. This was an example of something that like sort of reminded me of that whole idea of it growing into a later time, like maybe being misread as being unfeminist or patriarchal. Well, this is an episode of Star Trek where Deanna Troi, the character, was pregnant, and she makes a point that the father is not there to help or be there for the birth, and the doctor states that she's never been around where a father has not been there to witness the birth. And this was seen as rather patriarchal in retrospect, that like, oh, that women cannot be independent in birthing situations. But at the time, actually, that this was made, it was considered incredibly uncommon for men to be at births for their children, because it was considered sort of like, oh, the women's time, and that they should wait outside. And so this was actually aiming towards feminism, and only in retrospect, now that it has become commonplace, and we now have more nuance in the sort of relationships and singularity that someone could be in when they are giving birth, that we are like, oh, that seems like an odd choice. And it reminded me of Judy Chicago and her vagina plates. So this was the second thing I was thinking of. I'm now tying it into feminism and the visual narrative reading we did, because I was thinking a lot about the sort of voyeurism and viewership, and how in Creature from the Black Lagoon, in one of the very first scenes, we fully see the creature in a moment where we are supposed to relate to him, is when he is viewing without her knowledge or consent. Kay, the scientist who you can see in this white swimsuit that was considered so scandalous at the time, it had to go up against a board for decency purposes, and they put it right to the very edge of what was considered decent in 1952. They had actual faxes and telegrams for this purpose at the studio. I think that's a little ridiculous, but anyways, so it was I was thinking of the idea of voyeurism, and how, like, in this moment we were supposed to relate to the creature. We are also doing exactly what he is doing, watching Kay without her knowledge or consent, and it is meant to be this sweet scene, and there is this gentleness to it, but, like, after the reading, I can't help but feel this sort of discomfort of, like, watching without knowledge. and the intentionality of it, even though she is, an actress. Like, Julia Adams is an actress who has consented to doing this, but it feels like strange to be like the creature watching this woman. Anyway, so. And then I was also thinking about like the part of the writing about pleasure and gratification, and how, like in actual instances, frequently, even like from the 70s into now, like women are frequently punished for their gratification or sexual pleasure in horror cinema. Well, actually, in a lot of cinema, but especially in the horror genre, it's really well known. In fact, it's a trope that is now joked about, like when referencing itself. Like here in these two, this is from A Nightmare on Elm Street, where Tina Gray, the friend of the protagonist, who is meant to be the final girl because she is pure and a virgin, ends up dying right after having sex. She dies in a very brutal way where her body is dragged around and bleeds as she's like killed, and the boy she was with can do nothing about it. And then here from Halloween 1978, Annie Brackett, who is again the friend of the final girl and our protagonist, uh, ends up dying as she goes to bring the girl she was babysitting to her friend's house so she can go have sexual relations with her boyfriend. And now it's not as if he's killing her for doing so, but the frequency of death for women who do have sexual relations in movies doubles that of the amount of women who are killed when they remain a virgin because they are pure and make good choices in these horror films. This is another example. Allison from Chopping Mall. She is the only girl who gets to survive to the end of the film because she is the only one who does not have sex. And this is a pervasive aspect of the genre, and I like here Slumber Party Massacre, while like leaning more towards the feminist aspects in the actual writing of it because of the female director. The producers mandated that there had to be a certain amount of nudity in the entirety of the film, and there is a rather phallic aspect to the way the killer comes after the women with the drill and literally penetrates them in moments of like nudity and vulnerability throughout the film. And here you can see there's this joke that the virgins never die in horror films, and it's been like brought up over and over to the point where, in 2012, when it was officially released, Cabin in the Woods makes a spoof on this. That there are these archetype characters who they are killing to appease a god, and the one who always has to go first is the whore. They literally refer to her as the whore, despite the fact that the other character has also had sexual relations, but now that she's no longer in a relationship and cannot actively gratify a guy, she is now labeled the virgin, and she is allowed to live, but she still has to suffer. Which is this ridiculous notion. And so this is what I was thinking of, like, because a lot of the essay is going on about how we have broken away from like the monolithic ideas and puritanism of like 1950s Hollywood, but these tropes still exist all the way from the 50s into modern movie, because we may be acknowledging that this is a trope that repeatedly happens, but that doesn't change the fact that it is still occurring. And it's like you can't simultaneously wink at the audience and be like, we know this happens, and then proceed to continue with the behavior of it. Anyways, so that was what I took from the readings. I really enjoyed them, and I'm excited to be watching the documentaries for the upcoming class. Hmm. Hang on. Is it still recording?